Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to talk about the difference between block level and an inline level elements. We're going to also talk about divs and spans and also some new semantic variations of divs that have been added to HTML5. So let's just jump right in. I already have my screen up here. And this is where we left off in the last video, talking about our tables and everything like that. This page is getting a little crazy, so let's just click on the home page. And let's just see if you notice something. So in the home page, we created an HTML or a heading tag in our HTML here. So we had a heading and then we had a couple paragraphs, and these paragraphs would break down to the next line on their own. So they took up 100% of the width of the page, and then they would break down. And then you notice when we created our links, they're just kind of right next to each other. Well, this illustrates perfectly what a block level versus an inline level element is. So headings, paragraphs, and we're going to learn divs and other elements like that that break down to the new line. These are known as block level elements. Okay, these are block elements. An inline element, such as a link and a span, and some others that we'll see in a little while, are inline. So these do not break down on their own. We would have to do something with styling or tell them to break down for them to go down to the next line. And it's useful for us to know this. There's a lot of different things that kind of go into styling those things. But I just want to kind of show you on the screen the difference between a block level and an inline element. And we've already kind of seen that with headings and these links. Okay, so let's jump in here. What I want to do is let's just go back to the index.html since we're on this page here. And what I want to show you is underneath our tags here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a div tag. Now these div tags, if they don't really do anything on their own. So if I just put some text in here, well, that's not true. They do something, but you can see that it automatically creates a new line here, and this will take up 100% of the width. Even if the text inside of it doesn't take up the whole width, this element will take up the entire width of the page. And in fact, if I look down into my inspector and we come over and we highlight that div tag, you can see that it highlights blue all the way across. But if I highlight over the links, they're only as big as the content within them make them. Okay, they kind of shrink down to that size. So a div, I can add another div here, and this div, I'll just put another div, and you can see that there's not much content inside of these divs, but it will force them to be on separate lines. And so that is a div is typically used. You'll see a lot of divs on a web page generally, and divs are usually created to create divisions on the page, and so you'll block out, and so you might have like your entire header. If it's a banner across the top, that's a div, and then your menu would be a div, and then your main element would be a div, and then inside that you'd have many other divs. And we use those divs a lot of times because we might want to put like a border around a div, or we might want to put one div to the left and another div to the right. And we'll learn how to do all of that. But by default, a block element like a div or a heading or a paragraph will take up 100% of the available space on the screen, and an inline element such as a link will only use as much space as the content within it, and it will shrink up. So let's look at another example of an inline that you would use as kind of like the counterpart to a div, but it's an inline, and that's called a span. Okay, now a span, I'm just going to put first span, and what we'll do is I'll go down to another line, I'll put another span here, and I'm going to put second span. And if you can guess what this will do, these are inline elements, so they are not going to break down to new lines. You can see that there's a first span and a second span, and they're right in line with one another. Now the reason that this right here started down on this next line and wasn't in line with this is because this, another div, this is block level. So remember, this takes up the entire width of the screen, and so it forces whatever comes after that to be down in the next line. Okay. And a practical use of what a span is used for a lot of times is you'll have something like this where you'll have, let's just do a paragraph tag, and I can put my favorite color is purple. What is yours? Okay, and what we might do here is we might want to highlight this purple. And so what we can do is we can actually wrap that in a span. So let me pull purple and I'll put it inside this span here. And if I just save that and refresh the page, you'll see that there's no difference. But because that's an inline element, purple is still inline and it doesn't break down, so it's just in the middle of the sentence. And then what I can do is I can actually give a little bit of styling, and I know we haven't gone over this much, but you can style with the style attribute. And what I can say here is I can do something like color purple. Okay, so you can see the whole line here. And I'll refresh, and now that's a little hard to show up, but you can see. Let me do one more thing to make it show up a little bit more. We can also do font weight colon bold semicolon and refresh, and now you can see that this is bold and purple. And let me just I'm gonna break this down just to make to where we can see the whole thing here. Okay, so it doesn't change regardless of any line breaks that I have in my code, because remember, line breaks and spaces in HTML, they don't mean anything. Okay, I can have, in fact, I can put like a ton of spaces here, and when I refresh, it doesn't add spaces before this is right here. Okay, it will respect that first one, but after that, it doesn't care about those spaces. It assumes you're doing it just to organize your code. Okay, so that is kind of the difference between a span and a div. The span, and both of them will allow you to target this area and do something different with it. For example, I could do the same thing in this div here, and let's say I wanted this other div to be red. I could say style equals color red, like that. And when I refresh, now just that div is red and just this span is purple. So they kind of do the same thing, but this is a block level and it will take up 100% width, so it'll cause a page break. And this span allows me to do inline styling or inline something. You could do inline a lot of things, but another example of an inline element by default is a link. Okay, so you got spans and links, and those are both inline. And then we have headings, paragraphs, and divs that are block level. Okay, so that's the difference between a block level element and an inline element. One last thing I'd like to talk about is, how I told you that a typical web page might have divs everywhere? And that's a problem for a couple of reasons. One, you start looking at your code and you end up having tons of div elements, just div after div after div after div after div, and they're nested, and you start kind of forgetting why you have those divs there. And a lot of times you end up using those divs just to style something or just to segment it on a page. And so HTML5 did something really cool where they gave us more semantic ways of doing that. So instead of having a bunch of divs, and I'm not going to go through them all, but what they did was they added some stuff like, let me give you an example. You can have a header. Okay, so header. Now this doesn't do anything as far as styling. You can see that it acts just like a div, but semantically the code reads better. So this is going to be my header, and then say this was at the top of the page here. I could do another one. Say I wanted a nav bar underneath that. Well, there's a nav one now, and this could be my navigation. Okay, so if I refresh, you can just see it acts just like a div, but it's more semantically written up in the page. And then I'll show you two more. I'll just show you a couple more. There's an aside. So this might be a sidebar. And then you have section, and this could be your main content on your page. And then another popular one here is footer. So this would be kind of the antithesis of a header. It'd be at the bottom of the page, and this would be footer. Okay, so screen readers would kind of know, because of semantically how this is written, and other things would know this is more of a semantic layout. It's more readable in your code, and it's also more readable for accessibility, like screen readers and stuff like that. Because traditionally what you would do here is you would do this. You would have a div, and you would say header, and then you'd have another div, and you'd say my navigation, and you do another div, and this would be the sidebar. And you can see as you go through your page, it starts getting a little crazy. And so HTML5 gave us these nice semantic versions of divs, basically, that we can do in our page to help it be more readable and to help it be more semantic. So I hope that makes sense. We will, in the next video, carry on. And I think in the next video, what we're going to do, let me look at the syllabus here. We are actually going to talk about images. We haven't done any images yet, so we're going to throw some images on the screen. And we're only going to have a few more videos. I think we're going to do images, and then we're going to do a video on forms, and then maybe just a kind of a recap or kind of a discover where to go to learn more type thing. And so we will see you in those videos, and then we're going to get started in the next chapter with CSS, and we're going to learn more about these styles and how we can lay our page out to be more pretty and to make more sense. So it's not just this boring HTML thing. It'll start looking more like a website that you would visit on a day-to-day basis. Okay, well, talk soon.